Lawbreeze and Gentlegrams. In today's episode of Lawbree and Jermaine in Gentleland, after Kendrick gave us Meet the Grams, the gavel-guzzling glizzy gobbler fake gangster Gram got his ghostwriters to concoct comically callous, cringy mariachi music, making a mockery of Mexican accents with his response to Meet the Grams, Meet Your Padre. So in today's video, the petty petition Padre will be meeting the 4'5" feet-whipping frontliner of the Big Three, Mr. Kung Fu Kenny, and the atomically habitual apologist J. Cole, in a battle to decipher who is truly the biggest of the Big Three. J. Cole said, "We're the Big Three like we started a league, but right now I feel like Muhammad Ali." Kendrick said, "F the Big Three, it's just Big Me." And Drake said his girlfriend's a lesbian and he is too, and that when Kendrick opens his mouth, he should get Grammys. Now, ultimately in this video, I'll sprinkle my opinion in here and there, but we want to judge the battle of the Big Three with no bias, so we're going to be looking at the Big Three factors. Number 1, the highest praised projects of the Big Three. Number 2, the highest selling projects of the Big Three. And number 3, we'll be taking a look at the top 10 biggest songs of the Big Three to see who's really crushing the competition from a commercial and critical standpoint, and who stands to be the best of the Big Three. But before we do that, I gotta put you guys on to some free money. A bunch of you guys have been saying this has helped you make a couple bucks while you're chilling on your phone. Now, while Rapaholics does not condone a phone addiction, I definitely do suffer from it, and FreeCash.com has helped me make money while playing some of my favorite mobile games. FreeCash.com is a website that partners with mobile games who are looking to get more users, and basically they'll pay you to simply play games on your phone. All you gotta do is scan the QR code on your screen or hit the link in the description. Make an account, it's super easy to do. All you need to do is sign up with your email, create a password, verify your email, and you're good to go. You could start making up to $200 just by playing mobile games. Again, scan the QR code or hit the link in the description. I don't condone no phone addiction, but if you're looking to get your game time fix in, FreeCash will give you free cash, making gaming a win-win. So let's start off with the top 10 highest streamed songs within the Big Three. We know these guys have been dropping nothing but hits for the last 10 to 15 years. Drake is obviously the numbers guy, but I think it's interesting to see how much of a presence Kendrick and J. Cole have actually had on the charts relative to Drake, especially when you look at the grand scheme of things, their overall catalog, and how their biggest hits stack up to Drake's biggest hits. And looking at it from a critical perspective too, it's interesting to see how many Drake albums have actually been critically acclaimed compared to Cole and Kendrick's. So let's start off with the top 10 most streamed songs. At number 10, we have Hotline Bling with Drake at 1.42 billion streams in total. If you guys don't remember, this song was initially released as a remix to Dram's song Cha Cha. I believe Drake put it on SoundCloud the same day he released Back to Back, but because it ended up being such a big hit, he actually unfortunately took Dram off the credits. Dram has called him out for this. He even said that Drake's latest hit, Nokia, is biting one of Dram's songs, and Dram has gotten into it with Drake's entourage. It didn't end too well, and if you guys want me to do a full breakdown on the history of Drake stealing from Dram, let me know in the comments. But otherwise, let's get into the 9th most streamed song of the Big Three, which is going to be another Drake track, In My Feelings, which has 1.436 billion streams. This was similar to Hotline Bling, released at the height of one of Drake's beefs. After bowing out of the battle with Pusha T, Drake redirected all the smoke at Kanye West, with Kanye even believing that Drake was insinuating there might have been some funny business with Kanye's wife at the time, Kim Kardashian, on the chorus of this song when he sung Kiki, Do You Love Me?
Now, if I wasn't in a medicated state, I might have thought and had the wherewithal to say, "Hey, Pusha, don't diss Drake on my beat." And I spoke about that and took accountability for that. What I'm looking for my spirit to take accountability is the fact that it's people making rumors or thinking that you my wife and you're not saying nothing and you carrying it like that, that don't sit well with my spirit. You know, if I had a girlfriend from Chicago, her name was Renita, and then you was married to Rihanna, I wouldn't make no song called Riri. So when you're like, "Oh, I don't know where it come from," you too smart for that, bro. You know where that come from. Don't make no record with nothing that could be confused. Now, I told you, I didn't tell Pusha no information about your baby mama, nothing like that. That ain't come from me.
I'll give it to Drake. This was a TikTok hit before TikTok existed, but I don't think it's aged well, and that's why it's getting one of the lowest daily streams of any of the songs on this list. But now we get into the 8th biggest song, which is going to be Kendrick's 2017 track Love off his album Damn, one of his biggest songs of all time, still in the top 100 today of Spotify, and in total it's racked up 1.539 billion streams. On a side note, there's a great remix or mashup to this song with the instrumental of Kanye West's song Slow Jams. I'll try to link that in the description. One thing Kendrick Lamar could have done better in his career is hop on more Kanye West production, but now it's looking like the only thing Kanye's producing is Mustache Man t-shirts, so that ship might have sailed. But Kendrick is not short of hits, no pun intended, since he is the short-statured assassin, as he comes in again at number 7 on the list of the biggest streamed songs of the Big Three. Money Trees clocks in at number 7 with 1.763 billion streams in total. Crazy, because that song has been caking in crazy amounts of streams on a daily basis, even 12 years after its release. It's gotten so many streams that it's actually eligible for Diamond, meaning it sold over 10 million copies in the US, but it's actually never entered the Billboard charts until Kendrick did his Super Bowl halftime performance earlier this year in February of 2025. 12 years after its release. Shout out to J-Rock too. Now at number 6 of the biggest songs of the big three, we got another Drake entry with Passion Fruit, which clocked in 1.79 billion streams. This was when Drake was in his island phase. This is what Kendrick was talking about when he said, "I like Drake with the melodies, I don't like Drake when he act tough." I guess the world agrees, because this is one of Drake's most streamed songs. Then at number 5, we got another Kendrick track that he actually performed at the Super Bowl with All the Stars featuring SZA at 2.084 billion streams in total. That was off the Black Panther soundtrack, and Kendrick has another movie coming out with the creators of South Park, Matt Stone and Trey Parker. There's rumored to be a soundtrack releasing with that movie, and that would be crazy if that's the next Kendrick solo album we get, especially because the creators of South Park are musical geniuses themselves. You know, I got my wish, 'cause I know that I'm a gay. The movie's got a crazy storyline too. It's a comedy film that will quote-unquote see the past and present coming to a head when a young black man who is interning as a slave reenactor at a living history museum discovers that his white girlfriend's ancestors once owned his ancestors. That's gonna be crazy, but anyways, let's move on to the 4th most streamed song of the big three, which is where we finally get Mr. Might Delete Later, reconciling Cole World himself, J. Cole, with No Role Models, clocking in at 2.505 billion streams. Insane track. Then at number 3, we got Kendrick Lamar again with Humble, which clocks in at 2.52 billion streams. That damn album's going crazy. He's got 2 entries in this top 10 list just from that album alone. Then at number 2, we got Drake again with God's Plan, clocking in 2.71 billion streams. One of Drake's biggest hits, but his biggest hit and the biggest song to ever be released from anyone from the big three is another Drake entry with One Dance, which garnered the gavel-guzzling gram a gargantuous 3.54 billion streams in total since its release. Many people criticize that song. I actually kind of like it. There's a great house remix by Peace Control, and that's not only the biggest streamed song from the big three, it's also one of the most streamed songs on Spotify of all time. But again, while Drake is the hitmaker, it's interesting to see here that while he makes up a majority of the top 10 most streamed songs from the big three, having 5 out of the 10 songs on this list, Kendrick is not too far behind him, having 4 out of the 10 biggest songs from the big three in terms of streams. And then you got J. Cole with 1 out of the 10 songs, No Role Models, as the 4th biggest streamed song out of the big three. He's also got a couple other hits that are lingering around the top 15 most streamed songs from the big three, with Wet Dreams and Middle Child all clocking in around 1.2 to 1.3 billion streams. Also, Kendrick's DNA and Drake's Nice for What also have around 1.2 to 1.3 billion streams. If you guys were curious, Not Like Us, with just around 8 to 9 months of release, has already clocked in 1.2 billion streams, approaching that list of the top 10 biggest streamed songs from the big three in less than a year. You also had Work by Drake and Rihanna, which would have made this list, but Drake just has a verse on it, so I didn't count it. He's a feature on the song, and it's really Party Next Door who wrote that whole song. So shout out to Party. Glad to see Drake took him out of the OVO sweatshop. But now let's get into something interesting, right? Because the numbers are one thing, but while the numbers might not lie, neither do the fans and critics. So let's take a look at every album released from the big three and see where they rank up in terms of how the critics and fans have rated them over time. Now, we're going to take this list from the albums that have the lowest critic scores to the highest. Some albums which have crazy low scores. We're going to dive into some comments that the fans and critics have made. And this data is coming from a website called Metacritic, which basically takes the average of all of the fans and all of the critics' ratings of an individual album. So again, we're going from lowest to highest. So the lowest rated album of the big three on this list is going to be Drake's album, For All the Dogs. His most recent solo release, the album that featured the song First Person Shooter, which kicked off the massive rap civil war. And this was definitely a disappointing album, not just from my perspective, but also from the fans and critics who rated it an average score of 53 out of 100. 53%. Next up is going to be J. Cole's most recent release. With a score of 54, we got Might Delete Later. Now, this was a disappointing project, but it does have some redeemable qualities. Does it merit a 54 out of 100? You guys let me know in the comments. But one critic who I thought predicted a lot of what was to transpire after the album was released, who really didn't like the album, rating it a 1 out of 10, was the outlet Sputnik Music. And with this horribly low score, they said, for a decade now, J. Cole has been allowed to exist in this liminal space where he is considered one of the greats despite merely having only one more than good album under his belt in that time frame with 2014 Forest Hills Drive. Other than that album, his reputation has managed to skirt by on the backs of brilliant guest verses, while his albums rattled off a series of broken promises that true greatness was still on the way. If you can tell me a single song off of the off-season without looking, I will call you a liar. On a side note, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I could definitely name you a bunch of songs off the off-season. That was a great project, but I understand what they're saying. You know, J. Cole always props himself up as one of the greats, someone who any rapper should be scared of getting on a track with. But when it comes down to it, he backs out of rap battles. But this review was actually released before the rap battle ever took place. It was right when J. Cole released 7 Minute Drill, before he apologized and took it off of streaming platforms. So they continue saying, if we zoom out, it's clear that Jermaine has been spending a little too much time with Drake and learned all the wrong lessons. His song HYB off the album, which stands for Hide Your B Word, and yes, that is a play on the ancient hide your kids, hide your wife meme, the song finds Cole borrowing Aubrey's penchant of culture vulturing to briefly pretend that he's British. Yes, they wrote it like British in the review, saying, right with a bona fide drill song. He says the quiet part out loud when he says, I keep forgetting I'm J. Cole. That's one of the bars off this song, and this reviewer actually reminded me how bad some of the bars on Might Delete Later were. They claimed he delivered a strong contender for one of the worst bars of all time with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, M, N, O, P. That's little me in the classroom asking, what's L? Oh my man, drop a like and a subscription for the bars that I was spitting at the beginning of this video because they were single-handedly better than a lot of the bars off this Might Delete Later project. The reviewer continues saying, Might Delete Later is a miscalculation at every level and may prove in time to be his version of Chance the Rapper's The Big Day. Wow, that's a big claim. When the stage was set and the lights were bright, it will be remembered that Cole sunk into a dozen tracks of empty posturing and punchlines that border on character suicide. It's not hard to imagine these lyrics plastered over the image of him on his bike joining the likes of Donnie Darko as shorthand for quote-unquote I'm 14 and this is deep style insults. At the time of writing, Might Delete Later was released 13 hours ago. J. Cole might want to consider quote-unquote later being right now. And it's crazy how well this aged, right? This review was written up 13 hours after the album was released, and very shortly after that, he actually did delete tracks off that record, the diss tracks aimed at Kendrick Lamar, and they claimed that this album would be borderline character suicide. I mean, you could definitely make the argument that that one track, 7 Minute Drill, might have been. So for all those reasons and more, that's why Might Delete Later is the second lowest rated album of all time from the Big Three. And then the third lowest rated album of all time from the Big Three lands with another Drake album, his most recent one, Some Sexy Sleepy Lullaby Love Songs for You, with the score of 55 out of 100. The outlet Pitchfork had some interesting commentary on it, giving the album a 5.9 out of 10, saying, Drake's singing voice isn't nearly as tender and smooth as it once was. Sometimes the effect is monotonous and emotionless, which might suit his headspace, but ultimately it's just boring. When he adds a little spice to his voice, he can still sound expressive, like on the album Standout, Small Time Fame, which, if you ignore the shamelessness of the Brat Summer bar, features him at his most earnest. I wouldn't say that's a highlight off the project, but it definitely did sound monotonous and emotionless for the most part. Crazy, the lowest rated albums of all time from the Big Three all came from Drake and J. Cole, either right before the beef or right after. Then you got another couple Drake projects, Certified Lover Boy with a score of 60, then you got Darkling Demo Tapes with a score of 61, Her Loss with a score of 62, Scorpion with a score of 67, and then we got, to my surprise, Forest Hills Drive, 2014 Forest Hills Drive by J. Cole, also with a score of 67. I don't think this is on the same level as a Scorpion. I don't believe it only deserves a 6.7 out of 10, but I guess a lot of these reviews were done 10 years ago in 2014, and sometimes you got to give projects a little bit of time to age. But back then you had a couple critics who definitely gave it some low reviews. The Observer gave it a 6 out of 10, saying, J. Cole's a smart, self-assured lyricist, confident enough to end with a 14-minute thank you track, but not as interesting in his contradictions as the likes of a Drake or Kanye West. I think that still holds true 10 years later. But I will say 2014 Forest Hills Drive, maybe aside from The Life of Pablo, was the most interesting album from either Drake, J. Cole, or Kanye West in the last 10 years since it was released. Pitchfork also gave it a 6.9 out of 10, only 1 point higher than Some Sexy Sleepy Love Songs for You, and they said with his third album, the North Carolina rapper J. Cole is certain he's made a classic. He'll tell you as much partway through the 15-minute credit roll, note to self. In his quest to canonize, the record is absent of both singles and guests. It's a bold move, and where it floats, it soars, but it flops gloriously when it doesn't. Basically saying there's some very high points on this album, but also some very low points, and that's probably thanks to J. Cole doing all the production by himself and having no features. But look, 10 years later, there was that whole meme, J. Cole went platinum with no features. And the song off that album, No Role Models, is one of the most streamed songs out of any of the songs from Drake, Kendrick, or J. Cole. Does this deserve a score of 6.7 out of 10? I don't know about that. Then you got Drake's album Views with a score of 6.9 out of 10. And before this album came out, I was a massive Drake fan. Nothing Was the Same, Take Care, If You're Reading This Is Too Late. I think that was a phenomenal 3-album run. This is where it kind of got stagnant and formulaic for me. And one of the critics from MTV summed it up perfectly in my opinion, saying, the unenthusiastic response to the record may have been attributed to Drake's unwillingness or inability to significantly evolve beyond his time-tested signature sound, clinging to the comfort of the same frosty 40 beats, zingy aphorisms, and perennial trust issues. 10 years later, he's kind of making the same music. And then on this list, we got another Drake album, Drake and Future, with What a Time to Be Alive with a score of 7 out of 10. Then we got J. Cole's Born Sinner with a score of 7.1 out of 10. And on a side note, this does not deserve to be rated higher than 2014 Forest Hills Drive, but I digress. You also got, at the next spot on this list, another J. Cole project with KOD, a score of 7.3 out of 10. And notice, we haven't seen a single Kendrick album yet. But this might come as a surprise to you guys, as the next album on this list, higher than Forest Hills Drive, higher than a bunch of these J. Cole albums, is Honestly Nevermind by Drake with a score of 7.3 out of 10. I appreciate Drake for taking the risk on this album, but again, I think his vocals, the subject matter, the hooks, the melodies on this project, they're all very underwhelming and monotonous. We'll go through some of the commentary for it. One of the reviewers said, Honestly Nevermind is a welcome development in the Drake saga, a left turn off what was starting to seem like an endless stretch of trap-heavy highway. The destination is still sad and self-involved, but at least the scenery is colorful and never boring. And I guess I get that. I like the production on this thing. It was majority handled by Kinda Music and Black Coffee. It was really just Drake himself that was kind of the disappointment of the project. But the album didn't get as much love from the hip-hop community, with the only hip-hop outlet that reviewed it saying, Drake breaks no new ground here and retreats the same tales of love and regret so many times that the songs bleed together. If you want just background music for making love, this is your album. If you want to have your imagination captured by fantastic tales or be taken on an emotional roller coaster, don't bother. There are no highs or lows here. We're on medium mode the entire time. I think that's a good way to sum it up, but still a 7.3 out of 10 for this project is kind of crazy to me. Then we move on to another Drake project, Thank Me Later, his debut album, which has a score from critics of 7.5 out of 10, which is funny in retrospect because Drake himself actually has a lot of criticisms on that project. I definitely think there were some highlights. Jay-Z's verse on Light Up, Lil Wayne's verse on Miss Me, Young Jeezy's performance on Unforgettable. There were some great features here. Some solid Drake songs too, with The Resistance, Karaoke. Beautiful Kanye production on Find Your Love and Show Me a Good Time. Fun fact, Find Your Love was actually initially supposed to be on 808s and Heartbreak. Then it was supposed to go to Rihanna, and then it ended up falling in Drake's lap. Just like Rihanna, I think. Some of you guys in the comments sometimes say that they never actually dated. It was all just a fantasy in Drake's head. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. But it seems like both Drake and J. Cole's debut albums both got the same amount of love, because Cole World, the first album produced by J. Cole, also got a score of 7.5 out of 10. as well as his fourth album, For Your Eyes Only, which also got 7.5 out of 10. You also have one of Kendrick's early mixtapes, Overly Dedicated, with a score of 7.5. And on a side note, I've actually never listened to that project front to back, so drop a comment if you guys want me to do a full breakdown of it as I do my first full-length listen. Then we got J. Cole's album that critic claimed you could not name one song off of, or you'd be a liar if you said you could. That'd be The Off Season with a score of 7.6 out of 10. I honestly thought this was a great project, one of the best of the 2020s decade. And there's a bunch of amazing songs there. Amiri, The Climb Back, Hunger on the Hillside, My Life. I definitely suggest you guys check that out if you've been sleeping on it. But let's move on to the next set of projects. And these are the ones that you could argue have critical acclaim, right? Anything hovering around a score of 8 out of 10, even like 7.8 out of 10. I would say that's in the upper echelon of these projects. And the first few on this list are going to be If You're Reading This Is Too Late by Drizzy Drake, a definite standout from his catalog with an average score from fans and critics of 7.8 out of 10. It's a shame that Quentin Miller wrote this entire project and barely got any credit for it, but this features some of Drake's best tracks. Star 67, Jungle, No Tellin', Madonna. This was also a surprise release, labeled as a mixtape, randomly dropped on iTunes one night. Yes, this was still back when we were using iTunes. And fun fact, this was actually one of the last physical CDs I ever bought, because at the time of this project's release, back in 2015, they were shutting down all the CD stores in my hometown, and they were putting all these CDs on massive discounts because they just needed to get rid of stock. They used to cost like 10, 15, 20 bucks. I think I bought If You're Reading This Is Too Late for like $4, Canadian dollars too. To all you Americans, that's like pebbles, not even pennies, pebbles. You'd be lucky if that gets you a small fry at McDonald's these days. But I guess that's fitting because these days Drake makes fast food music. But anyways, let's move on to an album that costed a little more money because it came out back when CDs were very much still a big thing, and that would be another Drake project with Take Care, which has the same score as If You're Reading This Is Too Late, 7.8 out of 10. It's hard to compare these albums because, you know, one's majority R&B with Take Care, then If You're Reading This Is Too Late is definitely more hip-hop focused. But I'd say they're both around equal, both two of Drake's best projects. But then we got another Drake project, which isn't so good, but somehow rated higher than both Take Care and If You're Reading This, and that would be More Life with a score of 7.9 out of 10. Definitely don't agree there, but I guess that's why he made it a playlist, right? Because you could kind of dodge the criticism of, oh, this is a poorly sequenced project. The subject matter is not up to par. It's kind of all over the place. It's lazy. He could just say, no, it's just a playlist of songs. But anyways, then we got another Drake project, Nothing Was the Same, with a score of 7.9 out of 10. One of Drake's highest rated albums. But higher than that is going to be the first Kendrick project on this list, with Section 80 with a score of 8 out of 10. The Black Panther soundtrack as well, 8 out of 10, but that's not a full-on Kendrick project. Then we got So Far Gone, Drake's first introduction into the mainstream. This has a score of 8.1 out of 10, so 1 point higher than Section 80. Let me know if you guys agree on that. I definitely like So Far Gone. I would say they're around equal. Above that, we got Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers with a score of 8.5 out of 10. So now, aside from Section 80, this is Kendrick's lowest rated album. Some critics loved it, some of them hated it. They were very torn, fans as well. I thought it was phenomenal. One critic gave it a perfect rating, saying, while Good Kid Mad City showed the world what it's like to grow up as a kid in Compton, his fifth album serves up vignettes. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that on a side note, but it serves up vignettes about what it's like to be a black adult whose trauma still haunts him. And that's a critic from NME. They gave Mr. Morale a 10 out of 10 rating, but then the New York Times gave it a 6 out of 10, saying that Mr. Morale is probably Kendrick's least tonally consistent work, rangy and structurally erratic, full of mid-song beat switches, sorrowful piano, and a few moments of dead air. And I mean, on a side note, I think the dead air was there to kind of express a point, right? On a lot of these tracks that were very narrative driven, like Auntie Diaries or We Cry Together or Mother I Sober, the production's very stripped back in order for you to actually understand and hear the story Kendrick's telling. This is not an album to party to, even though there are definitely a couple bangers on there with Silent Hill or N95. That word itself traumatizes me. As a Canadian, Not Like Us does not traumatize me. N95 traumatizes me because Trudeau had us lock the F down during COVID. We had like 8 p.m. curfews and stuff. Couldn't leave the house past 8 p.m. We were damn near prisoners. So this album came out right after COVID. When I saw the title N95, I'm like, I never want to hear the letter N next to N95 ever again in my life. But that's a good song. So 8.5 out of 10 for Mr. Morale. And then 1 point higher than that is another Kendrick project with Untitled Unmastered, a score of 8.6 out of 10. The highlights for me were Untitled 2 and 7, but honestly, this came out about a month after Life of Pablo, and we hadn't heard from Kanye in so long, right when he released that, so I vividly remember like Untitled Unmastered coming out, and it was very hard for me to put that Kanye album down to listen to this one. Even though, ironically, both those projects were kind of stripped back and unfinished. That was the first time we saw Kanye, experiment with that whole drop the album, then take it off streaming platforms, fix up the mastering, fix up a couple beats, and then re-release it. But this isn't about Kanye, it's about the big three. So let's move on to the next album on this list, and that's going to be none other than GNX by Kendrick Lamar with a score of 8.7 out of 10. Now, if you guys haven't been able to tell, we already went through all the Drake albums, all the J. Cole albums. The only album from Drake or J. Cole to get a fan and critic score above an 8 out of 10 is Drake's project So Far Gone. All the other J. Cole and Drake albums are between 5 to 7 out of 10. Meanwhile, all of Kendrick's have ratings of 8 out of 10 or above, and GNX is one of his highest rated albums, 8.7 out of 10. We got some commentary here about the project. One reviewer saying it was Kendrick's best album yet, more specifically saying every Kendrick album combines anthemic bangers with thoughtful, expansive self-interrogations. I always prefer the bangers, but there are no indulgent momentum killers among inward-looking songs on GNX. The sad and fond memories on the Hard Part 6 are genuinely gripping, and the Sixth Sense level twist at the end of Gloria genuinely shocked me. The sing-song lope of Dodger Blue briefly allows Kendrick to sound content with the world, while Luther glimmers like puddles in the sun. Even at its slowest and most ornate, this music is always funky. It always moves. But just 2 songs into GNX, I already knew I was hearing a classic album. 6 songs in, I knew I was hearing a historic moment. As I write this, GNX has existed for 4.5 hours, and I'm ready to tell you that it's the best album of 2024 and the greatest work of Kendrick Lamar's career. Maybe that initial euphoria will fade, maybe I'll eventually put everything in sober perspective and concede that it's merely a great album. I hope not. Miracles should always feel like miracles. F being rational. And I agree, man, like the more GNX ages, the greater to me it sounds. It has everything you could want as a Kendrick fan, right? It has the more somber, slower R&B cuts like a Luther or Gloria. You got some of Kendrick's best storytelling ever on songs like The Heart Part 6, Reincarnated. The concepts he weaved into Reincarnated and Gloria are definitely some of his most enthralling. Then you got obviously the absolute bangers where he really, took a step back to celebrate this victory and give the world like his most funky vibrational tracks. Hey Now, Peekaboo, TV Off, Squabble Up. You had him at his most motivational with songs like Man at the Garden. Starting the album off with a bang with Whacked Out Murals. That's like his version of a timestamp record. The whole thing is concise, straight to the point, but still offers tons of variety. I think it's incredible and just aging great. But that's not what Pitchfork thought. They gave it a 6.6 out of 10, saying, coming on the heels of the beef, the regionality of the album seems more like an elaborate gotcha to Drake rather than a musical pivot sparked out of passion. That missing spirit is in the production, too clean and synthetic. I think it's very hard to rank Kendrick albums. They're all so different, with GNX specifically feeling like his greatest attempt or effort at creating a mixtape sort of feel. I always say it reminds me of like 2001 by Dr. Dre. Just really an album full of straight bangers with a couple introspective tracks laced between the track list. You can make the argument it's his greatest album and simultaneously his worst, right? Because look at his catalog. If you're more of a fan of, introspection and vulnerability, you might prefer Mr. Morale. If you want more social commentary, you'll go to Pimp a Butterfly. You want a cinematic feel, you'll go Good Kid, Mad City. You want the hits, you'll go to Damn. You want that West Coast feel? No Kendrick album does it greater than GNX. But let's move on. So GNX had a score of 8.7 out of 10. Good Kid, Mad City is the 3rd highest rated album from the Big Three and from Kendrick with a score of 9.1 out of 10. Then you got Damn rated surprisingly considerably higher than Good Kid, Mad City with 9.5 out of 10. Then you got To Pimp a Butterfly, the highest rated album from Kendrick's catalog and from the Big Three, with a nearly perfect score of 9.6 out of 10. And that's incredibly hard, right? Like, you got thousands of fans, almost 100 different critics all rating this album. For them to all average out to almost a near perfect score speaks volumes to what people thought of that project. But now at this point, as you could see, obviously from, the critic standpoint, how fans actually rate and appreciate these albums, all of Kendrick's projects are at the top of the list amongst the Big Three. To Pimp a Butterfly, then Damn, Good Kid, Mad City, then Mr. Morale all having scores above 8.5, with Damn Good Kid and To Pimp a Butterfly all having scores above 9. All of Drake and J. Cole's catalogs are in between the 5 and 7 ranges, with most of them landing in the low 7 range. And then as far as the hit songs, the songs that have actually left an impact, some over a decade later, when you look at the top 10, you could see that Drake controls most of that, with 5 out of the 10 biggest songs from the big 3 coming from Drake, then 4 out of the 10 coming from Kendrick, and then 1 out of 10 coming from J. Cole. On a side note, we'll revisit this video in a year from now because this list is definitely going to change. Not Like Us is creeping up into that top 10. A couple J. Cole songs as well, like Wet Dreams, which is still getting consistent streams every single day, more than a lot of these Drake tracks. And then even tracks off GNX are getting streamed like crazy, and in a year from now could end up in the top 10 most streamed songs of the big 3 of all time. Songs like Luther already have 500 million streams just 3 months after release. But now let's get into the biggest albums from the big 3, right? Because it's one thing for the critics and the fans to love it, to rate these albums high, but if there's one thing numbers don't do is that they don't lie. So let's go through the most streamed albums from the big 3, and a lot of these names are going to surprise you because again, you might think Drake controls this list, but Cole and Kendrick have cooked up classics over the years that possess serious competition against these chart-topping Goliaths that Drake has released. So at number 33, yes, the big 3 has 33 albums in total that they've all released. 33, the lowest streamed album so far from the big 3, comes from Drake, Some Sexy Sleepy Love Songs For You. At the time of this video, the total streams are 228.5 million streams in total. I think that number might be a little bit higher. I'm missing like 1 to 2 days worth of streams for it, but it's still getting daily streams of 16 million. Ironically though, GNX is still outstreaming it, even though that came out 3 months ago and this Sexy Sleepy Songs album came out around a week and a half ago at this point. Then at number 32, the second lowest streamed album from the big 3 comes from Kendrick Lamar with Overly Dedicated, which has total streams of 231 million. People aren't listening to this project too much these days, with it only getting daily streams today of 169,000 per day. But it's an older project and it's a mixtape, so these numbers are definitely still respectable. Then at 31, you got Might Delete Later from J. Cole. This is one of the lowest streamed albums of the big 3. Total streams of 406 million streams. Crazy to think J. Cole really released one of the worst selling albums of 2024. Yeah, I know it was kind of like a mixtape and whatever, but there's some good songs on this project. People are sleeping on it. Trade the Truth in Ibiza, Pie, some of the best songs last year. But let's keep going. Then we got Untitled Unmastered with total streams of 557 million. Then we got Drake's Care Package with a total of 1.23 billion streams. That's basically just a compilation of all his unreleased music. He eventually put it onto streaming platforms. Songs like Trust Issues, Club Paradise, Free Spirit, a lot of his older throwaways. So still some respectable numbers there considering, again, it's a bunch of throwaways. But then you got above that Section 80 by Kendrick Lamar with a total of almost 1.3 billion streams. Still getting almost 800,000 streams per day in 2025. Then you got Drake's mixtape, So Far Gone, with 1.386 billion streams total. And it's funny because on a daily basis, Section 80 is actually outstreaming So Far Gone in 2025. Section 80 gets around 794,000 streams every single day on Spotify, while So Far Gone only gets 764,000. And that was the first Drake tape with all his, early big hits. Best I Ever Had, Successful. People aren't going back to that too much. But at number 26 of the big 3, we got KOD, which has 1.95 billion streams total. People aren't really listening to this too much on a daily basis today. It only gets around 317,000 streams every single day. I don't know if I was sleeping on this album or if it just didn't hit for me. I didn't love this project too much. The replay value wasn't there. That was the album he put out in 2018. I think there was just a lot of projects that overshadowed it. All of the Kanye releases, Daytona by Pusha T, Nipsey Hussle, Mac Miller's projects, Astroworld, XXX, Juice WRLD. 2018 was a great year for hip-hop. Then at number 25, with just 3 months on the charts, you got GNX, which has 1.951 billion streams. Its daily stream count is 21 million per day on a daily basis at the time of recording this video. So currently it is the project that is getting the most amount of streams on a daily basis from the big 3, considerably more than that new Drake project that was just released. And to get almost 2 billion streams on this album in just 3 months speaks volumes to, the amount of hits that Kendrick put on this thing. But then we'll keep going. We got What a Time to Be Alive at number 24 with almost 2 billion streams, 1.982 billion streams total. People aren't really listening to this much today, only 374,000 streams on a daily basis, which is sad because this is a great project. Then at number 23, we got J. Cole with the Off-Season, 2.13 billion streams. Then we got at number 22, Drake's album, Thank Me Later, his debut album, 2.164 billion streams. People are still bumping that. It's still getting over 1 million streams on a daily basis today in 2025. But J. Cole's debut album actually outstreamed Drake's debut album. Cole World has a total of 2.199 billion streams, and Cole World and For Your Eyes Only both rank right above Drake's Thank Me Later. But then you got another Drake project with Honestly Nevermind, 2.443 billion streams total. GNX in just 3 months has almost gotten as many streams as Honestly Nevermind has in almost 3 years. At number 17, you got Born Sinner by J. Cole, 2.813 billion streams. It's really the streams from the song Power Trip that are carrying this album. That was a solid album though. Then at number 16, you got To Pimp a Butterfly with 2.943 billion streams, and it's still getting streamed a lot in 2025. On a daily basis, it's getting around 2.6 million streams every single day. Right above that, you got Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers with over 3 billion streams total, and that's also getting a lot of spins in 2025 with 3 million streams on a daily basis. More than a lot of these Drake and J. Cole projects, which again is crazy. Like how you let a conscious rapper go commercial only making conscious albums. And that was released in 2022. Right above that is another 2022 release at number 14, Her Loss by Drake and 21 Savage. Has 3.5 billion streams total, around 400 million more streams than Mr. Morale. However, it's only getting half the amount of daily streams in 2025 as Mr. Morale is, as again, Mr. Morale has around 3.1 million streams on a daily basis. Her Loss is only getting around 1.6 million streams on a daily basis in 2025. Then at number 13, if you're reading this is too late, I thought this would have a lot more streams. It only has, well, not only, but it has 3.5 billion streams total, still getting around 1 million daily streams today. But like, again, this is one of his, best projects, really. So for Thank Me Later to be getting more streams on a daily basis than this, and for Cole World to be getting more streams than this on a daily basis is kind of crazy. But anyways, we'll keep going. At number 12, we got For All the Dogs with 3.583 billion streams, and again, this is the deluxe edition, so that has like 30 tracks on it, and it was released after Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, so it does have more streams than Mr. Morale, but on a daily basis, Mr. Morale is still outstreaming it in 2025, as For All the Dogs is getting around 3 million streams every single day today. At number 11, you have Dark Lane Demo Tapes, another Drizzy project, 3.624 billion streams total. And now we're getting into the top 10 most streamed projects from the big three. So at number 10, we have the Black Panther album with 4 billion streams total, still getting almost 7 million streams on a daily basis in 2025. A lot of that is coming from All the Stars, as that song alone has around half the total streams of this album, 2 billion streams. There's some massive hits on that project. At number 9, you have Drake's Nothing Was the Same with 4.39 billion streams total. On a daily basis in 2025, it's getting 1.4 million streams. Then at number 8, you got Drake's Take Care with 5.6 billion streams, and on a daily basis, 3.4 million streams total. So Take Care, which was released all the way back in 2011, is one of the most streamed Drake albums on a daily basis in 2025, outstreaming Certified Lover Boy, For All the Dogs, Honestly Nevermind, Her Loss, all of his more recent albums. So when anyone tells you, you're just hating on Drake, for me at least, I would say no. I loved all the old Drake projects. Take Care was a classic of the 2010s, and the numbers show for it. Longevity-wise, it's still getting tons of daily streams, more than a lot of his newer albums. And it was released way before the streaming era. If it was released in the streaming era, this would easily be one of the highest streamed albums of this whole list. Then at number 7, an album that was released in the streaming era, you got another Drake project, Certified Lover Boy, with 5.867 billion streams total, getting around 3 million streams on a daily basis today. At number 6, you got Good Kid, Mad City, another album released long before the streaming era, Kendrick's debut studio album. Yes, I know Section 80 exists, but this was the first one on a major label. And while Drake and J. Cole's major label debuts with Thank Me Later and Cole World only have around 1 to 2 billion streams total, Good Kid, Mad City has over 6 billion streams total since 2012, and it's still getting in 2025 5.4 million streams on a daily basis. Right above that, though, you got J. Cole's 2014 Forest Hills Drive with a total of 6.487 billion streams, still getting 2.6 million streams on a daily basis. So to all the critics and fans who gave that project a 6.7 out of 10, I think the numbers tell a different story, but I don't know. Maybe when it first came out, people resonated differently than they do today. But let's round out the top 5. So again, at number 5, we got Forest Hills Drive. At number 4, we got More Life with a total stream count of 7.647 billion streams, still getting 2.6 million streams on a daily basis. At number 3, we got Kendrick Lamar with Damn, absolute massive album, 9.259 billion streams total, almost 10 billion streams on Spotify. And out of all the albums from the big 3 that were released in the 2010s decade, Damn is getting the most amount of daily streams in 2025, as it's amassing 7.9 million streams on a daily basis today on Spotify. And then at number 2, you got Drake with Views with 10.458 billion streams. On a daily basis, it's still getting 3.6 million streams. And then at number 1, we got another Drake project, Scorpion, with 10.708 billion streams total. Daily basis, it's getting 2.685 million streams. So now this is an interesting top 10, right? The top 10 highest selling albums on Spotify from the big 3 goes at number 10, Black Panther soundtrack. Number 9, Nothing Was the Same. Number 8, Take Care. 7 is Certified Lover Boy. 6 is Good Kid, Mad City. 5 is 2014 Forest Hills Drive. 4, More Life. 3, Damn. Number 2 is Views. And number 1 is Scorpion. So it's interesting, right? You got 3 Kendrick projects, 6 Drake projects, and 1 J. Cole project. If you're looking at on a daily basis in 2025, which of the big 3 albums are getting the most streams, it's all Kendrick projects except for that new Drake album, with GNX having the most daily streams, then some Sexy Sleepy Love songs, then Damn, then the Black Panther soundtrack, then Good Kid, Mad City, then you got Views, Take Care, and For All the Dogs, and then you got Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, Forest Hills Drive, and the rest of the J. Cole and Drake albums. So from a numbers perspective, Drake is definitely the clear winner here. 6 out of the 10 most streamed albums from the big 3, 5 out of the 10 most streamed songs from the big 3, but these Kendrick projects are definitely creeping up. They're getting the most daily streams in 2025 out of any big 3 album, and his presence is definitely felt in this top 10. You can see here he makes up around like 35 to 45% of these top 10 lists. Drake makes up around 50% of the top 10 lists, and then J. Cole sadly makes up only around 10% of these top 10 lists within the big 3. And then from a critic and fan rating perspective, you got all Kendrick projects at the top of those lists, all rated between 8 to 9.5 or 9.6. Drake albums are averaging around a 74-ish, and then J. Cole is averaging around a score of 70. So if you put any value into these numbers, you could see why J. Cole says that, you know, they constantly throw the bronze at him. While he's part of the big 3 for a reason, he has phenomenal bodies of work, a phenomenal catalog. It's really been Drake and Kendrick competing with each other this entire time. And as far as the big 3, from a numbers perspective, Kendrick is creeping up. He overwhelmingly dominates on the critic side, while Drake dominates but not overwhelmingly on the numbers side. It's interesting to look at the top 10 of the most streamed albums from the big 3, because obviously streaming was only popularized in around 2016, 2017, right? So albums released after that are more susceptible to have bigger streams. That's why you got Scorpion and Views released at the height of the streaming era being the most streamed albums on this list, and Damn as well. But if you take a look a little bit further down this list, you can see where the true classics lie amongst the big 3. Forest Hills Drive, Good Kid, Mad City, and Take Care, and Nothing Was the Same were all released long before the streaming era, and they're all in the top 10 most streamed projects from the big 3. And ironically, while J. Cole oftentimes was not the clear winner on a lot of these lists, Forest Hills Drive is actually the highest streamed album from the big 3 that was released before the streaming era. It has, again, 6.487 billion streams total. It's the 5th biggest streamed album from the big 3 of all time. Good Kid, Mad City is right behind it with 6.1 billion streams. But I do think it's interesting that while J. Cole might not be as big as these guys, from a numbers perspective, might not be as critically acclaimed, as 2014 Forest Hills Drive only got a 6.7 out of 10. That album alone is carrying him amongst a lot of these lists. And him and Kendrick have definitely made an impact from a numbers perspective. While not as massive as Drake, with much smaller catalogs with a lot less albums, their presence was definitely felt on the charts as well. So I think it'll be interesting to timestamp this video in, 5-10 years from now and see how these lists have changed, which albums have aged the best, which artists continued to dominate the charts and continue to drop, critically acclaimed classic projects in the future, and who will take the throne when it's all said and done. So let me know in the comments, who do you guys think is really the biggest of the big 3? Please drop a like and subscribe if you appreciate me, and I will catch you all in the next Rapaholics video that you see.